Just one point on adding DeFi functionality. It's interesting that whenever we consider the user experience from these things, every every single token or every distinct integration is so distinct from one another. Like you can't have a blanket UX for doing DeFi. You know what I mean? So I think it's been interesting for us to think through each of these things as as its own puzzle of like how do you explain to users what they're doing? Like what does it mean to stake something? What does it mean to do all these distinct activities all umbrellaed under DeFi? So yeah, I mean I think that's one challenge that I think we are facing and still need to solve.
Speaking of design puzzles, liquidity baking.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind.
Yeah. So is there a benefit in all wallets having a uniform approach, or is it still something that every wallet should figure out how it fits within their specific framework?
That's a good question. I don't know what a wallet would make it specific to itself though.
Yeah, I think wallets are so different that it's a bit difficult to follow the same design for it, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense because the functionality is so specific to liquidity baking that you want to have an experience not too confusing compared to what everything else you're doing in the wallet. But I guess it makes sense to have your own touch in some way. But yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of what you'll notice is like if you look on different, like an exchange that has similar functionality or a wallet, that typically what happens is people will add the functionality and it'll just adapt to whatever UI is there. So like a tiny example of this is like the layout of something, right? Like if you put something, let's say they're inputs, right? If you put inputs one on top of another, it visually looks like top is the input, the bottom is the output, right? Like if you see on Uniswap or something, the top looks like the input and the bottom is the output. And so when you have sort of like templated UI that you can absolutely add the functionality to whatever it is, but if you don't think about how it works in a specific instance, it just gets really confusing, but it works. So it's like two things to consider. Like, is it enough that the thing works, or do you actually just need it to work well?
I think it is a competitive advantage for a wallet to provide better UX, as opposed to necessarily uniform UX, especially in this space where I don't find a lot of uniformity in UX. I mean, at least between the various Tezos wallets, there certainly is the functionality is similar but somewhat divergent, especially in the way that you interact with it. And I think for us, adding deep integration for some of these projects like liquidity baking, like these DeFi bits like Plenty and so on, I think is good. I think that's what makes the product stand out.
Do we think that kind of differentiation and that kind of variety is going to come to the NFTs soon?
I mean, in a way, it's a bit early to tell. So you're thinking, are we going to be able to do things differently depending on the type of NFT in your wallet when you buy them or when you interact with it?
Yeah, because now we're seeing NFTs encoding different behaviors, right? It's, on a large scale, you no longer just have NFTs which are pointers to a single JPEG. NFTs evolve and NFTs change. They do things. They become interactive. So, in the Tether space, like how far do we think we are from that, and how much of a design consideration is it going to be?
I think that's a good question. I don't know how far we are from it, but it feels important, especially with the larger discussions around NFTs that I'm hearing, like outside of our crypto bubble, it almost seems like there's two types of people who've like already made up their opinions about NFTs. You're either completely for it. Actually, no, I'd say three. Like either you've been in it from the beginning, you've faced the friction of having to learn what these things are, and you know, sort of had to take the time to learn the technology. That's one. The second type is the one that's like, oh, I can just right click this JPEG. Why do I need this? It doesn't, you know, and because it doesn't make sense, that's kind of where that stops, that opinion stops, which is unfortunate because I think skepticism is good. And like even when it started picking up here, like I think we all had a healthy dose of skepticism of what this means. And then the other type is the people who have just gotten into it now and are sort of on this hype train, and also don't realize that there's other cool generative things that NFTs can do. So I think if we're able to support these things, it'll only do good into showing what this technology can do. And I've also noticed that, like, especially when we're talking, there's like this implicit two ways we refer to NFTs. One being sort of art-based and obviously referring to, you know, collecting assets, and then the other being the more technical definition, where we often talk about the difference between using NFTs versus FTs or fungible tokens. So yeah, I don't think that more the more technical possibilities of NFTs is really talked about that much, but we talk about it a lot, so we should talk about it.
Very fortuitously, we're going to have a Twitter Spaces conversation about the NFT wallet of the future just this Wednesday. It's tomorrow.
Yeah,